Wednesday, September 11th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today I'm going to talk about what I was doing on September 11th, 2001, and talk a little bit about that event and what I think, compare it a little bit to the assassination of JFK in 1963. Before that, of course, I'm going to look at what the markets are doing this morning, what they did yesterday, and I've got my end of Fed mug. Just having a bit of coffee here. These you can get in my Teespring store, end of Fed mug. It says Robbing Americans since 1913. Maneco 64 here at the bottom it says. And here it says, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I've got other mugs, Billy mugs. I've got Shut Down the Bank mug. That's the Shut Down the Bank of England campaign to end the Bank of England, retire the old lady of Threadneedle Street, which is the nickname for the Bank of England. Anyway, a little later than usual. It's 8:06 a.m. London time. So we're going to look at where the markets are this morning before I go on to 9/11 and what I was doing that day. So yesterday, the stock markets were pretty weak. They were down a bit. Especially the S&P and the NASDAQ. But towards the end of the day, they rallied magically a little bit. The Dow actually finished up 74, which I think was better than it really was most of the day. S&P finished up just less than a point, and the NASDAQ finished down 3 points. But they weren't doing very well most of the day. It was like a magical last-minute Hail Mary action, so to speak. So let's see where we are this morning. Well, we've got spot gold up about $7 at $14.93. Range has been $14.84.50 to $14.95. I think yesterday we got back above 1500 briefly, but couldn't hold it. Yeah, that's where we are in terms of gold. Silver has been outperforming actually since yesterday. Silver got back up above 18 and stayed there most of the day. I noticed towards the stock market close, which is the post-market already for precious metals. They're trading just on the screen. It's not a regular session. They just whacked gold and silver down towards, gold towards the low of the day at 14.85, and silver, which had been above 18 all day, they whacked it down to 18. That's called painting the tape. I know, and I agree with Bob Moriarty on a lot of things he says, but he said he could write a book, with one-page book, saying that gold and silver are not manipulated. And he said that central banks have actually been buying gold for the last 18 years or so, or since 2011. But which central banks, Bob? It's not the Fed, the ECB, or the Bank of England, the major central banks, or the Bank of Japan, major central banks of the world. No, it's the Bank of China, Bank of Russia, the banks that are in the East, taking the gold away from the West. So yeah, you need to qualify that. Just to say that central banks are not manipulating the market because they're buying gold, net gold buyers. But which central banks? Anyway, enough of that. Spot silver actually is up 1% this morning. It's at 18.17, so up about 17 cents. The Dow is up 6.5 points, 26,907. S&P is unchanged, 2978. NASDAQ 100 future is at 78.15. Sterling 123.50. That's unchanged as well. So pretty quiet here. This is when Europe comes in, and we've been officially a lot of the stock markets open at around 8 o'clock London time, but it seems fairly quiet right now. Euro is 110.45. Tomorrow is the big day, ECB meeting. It's Mario Draghi's last hurrah, so to speak. From what I've been reading, unless he gives a lot of goodies, and which goodies do central bankers give most of the time? Well, free money, right? The last decade. Unless he does that, and his forward guidance is really dovish, we could see the euro rally quite strongly. The markets want, more. They've been addicted to the financial heroin for too long, and they can't live without it. So important tomorrow. The ECB decision is at 12:45 London time. The press conference starts at 1:30 p.m. London or 8:30 a.m. New York. Dollar is up slightly against the yen, 0.16%, 107.70. And the dollar is virtually unchanged against the Chinese currency, 711.28. WTI crude up 0.8%, 57.75. Brent is up 0.75% as well, 62.44. Bond markets are still under pressure a little bit in terms of the prices. Yields are up again this morning. We're at almost 172 in the 10-year. The 2-year is at 166. The 1-year T-bill yield is at 180. So that means that the market's still seeing several cuts going forward, probably by the Fed. Fed meeting, of course, is the 17th and 18th of this month. So next week, market expect the Fed to cut by 25 basis points. So September 11th, 2001, that was a Tuesday actually. And I remember it very, very vividly. I think most people who were adults or even children maybe, depends how old they were, will remember that day. I guess it's how people talk about the Jfk assassination, that they remember exactly what they're doing. I think the only person who said they didn't remember what they're doing on the Jfk assassination, I think it was George Herbert Walker Bush, Papa Bush. He said, "Oh, I don't remember what I was doing on that day," even though there are photos of him in Dallas. Photos of someone that looks exactly like him in Dallas, right? When he used to work for the CIA. But yeah, it was a Tuesday. So today is a Wednesday. Usually in the beginning of the month, there's no non-farm payroll data. So I think that data had come out the previous Friday. I was at work. I was working for ABN AMRO Bank, ABN AMRO Futures to be exact, in the city of London at 199 Bishopsgate. That's where I worked. And our dealing room was unusual. It was like we all sat around with our backs to each other in a kind of a circle, looking out the windows. We were in the corner of the building, and there was a big space in the middle. And it was a fun place to work. I think we're 11, 12 brokers. It was a nice place to work. It was a new office. ABN AMRO Futures had bought out Citibank Futures, where I worked from 1995 to 1997. And our offices at Citibank were really crammed in. It was in the Strand, which is not even in the city, in an old building in the Strand, and it was really crowded. So working at ABN AMRO was really nice. So yes, so what do I really remember about 9/11 when I think about 9/11, where I was? Well, I remember that I had a client, one of my good American clients. He worked for Citibank, and Citibank was at 388 Greenwich Street, which is a few blocks away from where the World Trade Center is. So all of a sudden, and I've gone to Wikipedia to find the times. And just for that, because if you Google 9/11 and go on Wikipedia, there's a lot of, how can I say, official story. There's the official story of the events of 9/11. And yeah, you can read that if you want, but I would say you do a little more research in terms of what happened that day, of course. So yeah, 8:46 a.m. So it was, that's when the, well, Wikipedia says the 5 hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into the northern facade of the World Trade Center's North Tower. So it was just before 1:45 London time. It's a time of the markets in London that are fairly quiet because we're waiting for the New York Stock Exchange to open at 2:30. So it's a time that it's pretty quiet. You might have had some numbers like at 8:30 a.m. New York, right? You have the numbers, the futures react, and then you wait for the open in New York. And I remember all of us, in our dealing room, we had speaker boxes, and we had clients that we had direct phone lines with. The big clients, right, that trade regularly, we have direct phone lines with, so they can just scream the orders through. We're always there. So all of a sudden, everything quiet around the dealing room. We were sitting, talking, to each other, the brokers, and all of a sudden I get this order through my tannoid, or the speaker, Mario, buy 500 Euribors. And I thought that was really weird because my client from Citibank was a soft-spoken guy. He would have called me through and say, Mario, buy me this. And usually he would have done maybe 100 or 50 lots. But he just blurted it out, buy 500 lots. And I did, and I thought, wow, that was weird. And then we start hearing about a plane hitting the North Tower. And at first, people thought it was maybe an accident, right? And then later on, of course, the other plane hit. I think it was 9:03. And then everyone was saying, wow, this is a terrorist attack, right? That was the first thing that came into people's minds. What about my family and personally? Well, my sister from Switzerland called me when the second plane supposedly hit the South Tower, and she was worried, and we were saying, wow, this is a terrorist attack, and because we had my other sister lived in New York, not fairly far away, New York City, fairly far away from where the World Trade Center is. So that's the other aspect of 9/11. So what about, and of course, the stock markets were closed that day, and they closed for another week. So it was, and people forget, it wasn't just the Twin Towers that were hit on that day. You had the Shanksville crash, which you look at the pictures, there were no planes there. It was just a black hole. I didn't see any planes. And then there was the Pentagon, where supposedly a plane flew into the Pentagon. But if you look at the pictures, it just looks like a hole, like a missile. Of course, I think they don't have the tapes at the Pentagon for some reason. They didn't work that day, so they couldn't show us. Anyway, it was so messy and so many things happening that yes. We were all like, the mood was very somber. I remember days and weeks after that, we were talking, my colleagues were buying gas masks. And I remember little games on the internet coming out, shooting, to shoot Bin Laden and stuff. It was all Bin Laden, right? So that's what I remember from it. And the mood was somber. People, it was a psychological operation, of course. So what do I think about 9/11? And I'm not going to go into it. This is my opinion. I've had this for many years. I bought this from InfoWars. That's what I think. So some of you might not agree with me, but some of you might. So there you go. What's the other thing that you learned from 9/11, in my opinion, as through the years? And when did I start thinking like this? Well, it was only a few years afterwards when I started looking into it, and you would usually be on the anniversary, right? Because people talk about it, and then you Google things, or you read on the internet, and then you find someone, oh, you know. So yeah, what did I learn about it? Well, I think Ephesians 6:12 says it best. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So that's what I think about 9/11. So what about the JFK assassination? Well, we are, in equivalent terms, we're back in 1982 in terms of, 19 years after JFK was 1982. And I remember 1982. I was about 17 or 18. And JFK assassination seemed to be way in the past. And everything, at the time, whenever you talk about JFK assassination, it's Oswald, right? Lee Harvey Oswald. So now we are at the equivalent time for 9/11, 1982. And I can see why young people probably don't know much about it, because I didn't really know much about the JFK, even though I've always been interested in history. And what's the first thing you think about, first person? Osama bin Laden, right? So they've been able to condition people into thinking about those two guys. That's what I think. So there you go. That was my experience of 9/11. They got it done before the market opened as well, which was interesting. I would have said if the terrorists wanted to really create havoc, they would have done it like maybe a little later, when most people would have been at work, when the financial markets would have been open. They would have created a lot more havoc. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Make sure you hit that little notification bell above to be notified of all my new videos. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.